welcome return to form by critics and fans alike, yet the new Magic Band were not altogether content with the finished article or comfortable with their performances.
At the time, I thought it had its peaks, and it definitely had its valleys. You know, I would say that I had more anxiety than pleasure about it. I just hoped, you know, I hoped that it was good enough, because I felt like I learned a lot during it, and I've sort of, in certain times, I thought that what I had thought beforehand and my alleged musicianship, which made it easy, possible for me to do his stuff, but sometimes got in the way. And I felt much more at ease and, in a certain way, successful with the album that came after it, which is called Dock at the Radar Station.
I would say just about every record that we made, there's a large feeling of disappointment in its finality, because you can't trap a storm. I found the recording of the material, particularly Bat Chain Puller II, Shiny Beast, particularly unrewarding as a listening experience, because the fury was not as potent as in the rehearsals. The rehearsals were always amazing. You know, the sound of the music, as it came together, the sketches, and as things would get piled on other things that are, you know, then certain things that had been top currents become undercurrents, and you know, the interest in the colors and the undefinedness of it is so exciting. You know, I'd be sitting there in a studio going, oh my God, and then by the time it's mixed and everything that made you go, oh, it's so exciting, is gone from it.
Beefheart and the Magic Band went on the road, playing various venues over the following year. In 1980, John French again joined the band, this time as guitarist, and Van Vliet acquired both a new lead guitarist and manager in long-term fan Gary Lucas. In June, the group began work on a new Beefheart album, Dock at the Radar Station. The customary laborious studio process was this time expelled from the band's method, and the album was recorded quickly and released 3 months later.
It fell together a lot more easily. It just seemed to be just a more natural process, and we spent less time going, like I said, is how does this compare? It just felt like its own entity, and it just seemed like when it actually came to recording it, it was probably all done in a week.
The longer that one can labor over something, the less power and magic and spirit it has. So I think that's why Doc has more, for me, more poomp to it, is because it came faster from him, came faster through us, and didn't have so much labor put into it.
The first impressions, certainly that I had of hearing Doc at the Radar Station, was that it was one of his best records. It was incredibly powerful, it sounded really fresh, and it took the Bat Chain Puller sound, or the Shiny Beast Bat Chain Puller sound, into a slightly different direction, more aggressive, and bringing in new elements as well.
I thought it was totally fresh and as exciting as any album that was currently out there by anybody. How it fit in the Beefheart canon, well, you know, there were tracks on there that I think are as good as stuff. My favorite albums are probably, well, Safe as Milk is, I like them all, you know, but Trout Mask and Lick My Decals Off stand out as the most radical statements, and I've always been attracted to kind of extreme music. So those were really, I guess, my favorites. And there were tracks on this that approached that, but it was different, you know? I mean, it was different players. It was a younger band. They didn't all live in a house together and drive each other mad. You know, you know, different kind of energy, and also the writing was different, the way that a lot of the music was organized. But yeah, I think it's brilliant. I think from a poetic standpoint too, the lyrics are as strong as anything he did, and even more direct. You know, a song like Ashtray Heart, which among other things seemed to be about his relationship to the so-called punk movement, which he did feel strongly had, you know, appropriated in a not very nice way a lot of ideas that he had pioneered. You know, they'd lifted stuff without really acknowledging him. I think that those are great songs. You know, it's a very moving album, and I found I could listen to it endlessly when, you know, it was finally assembled. There was always so many different facets to discover, and it holds up.
Lucas appeared as guitarist on only one track, Flavor Bud Living. It was a standout moment on the album.
The piece he gave me to learn was Flavor Bud Living, a guitar solo instrumental, which more or less put me on the musical map. It was the first recording, a big-time recording, where I was featured as a soloist under my name. My bit was done in June. I guess I flew out, got off a plane from New York, took a cab to the studio in Glendale, and I think nailed it in the second take. He just said, "That's it, that's great, let's use that." And spent a week out there. And then later on we did listening parties back in New York, where we invited key critics over to our flat in Greenwich Village, such as Lester Bangs. And actually the best compliment I've ever received on my guitar playing was a comment that Lester made after he heard Flavor Bud Living in this listening session. He turned to me and he said, "So what guitar are you playing on that, Gary, the top or the bottom?" I said, "Well, Lester, it's all me." And it's all, you know, in real time, just no overdubs. So, you know, to get one over on Lester like that was doing something right.
On its release, the album was praised as Beefheart's strongest for years. His period in the wilderness appeared to be at an end.
"'Cause she's a hothead, hothead, hothead."
Dock at the Radar Station opens with Hothead and Ashtray Heart. They're both quite propulsive, bluesy tracks. Elements of them sound like they could have come from Clear Spot, but mixed up with the sort of thorniness that you'd get with Troutmaster Replica and Lick My Decals Off. I think this is a signature of the entire album. It's got his blues elements there, but it's got that abrasive, more angular aspect that he kind of pioneered on Troutmaster and Lick My Decals Off. And I think that's why it works so well. It's a really good melding of all the elements that he's done throughout his career, with the exception of the mid-70s albums like Unconditionally Guaranteed and Blue Jeans and Moonbeams. Dock at the Radar Station is almost like a combination of all the best aspects of his style all put together, and I think that's why the album is so successful artistically.